All right, it says we are live. Okay, we got that muted. We're good. Stream health looks great. And it looks like we have some people on already. So let me double check one thing here real quick, and we will get rolling along, gentlemen and ladies. So just want to check, make sure. Come on. I'm just double checking the sound on the playback. All right, actually sounds really good. So welcome everybody to tonight's live Q&A. Tonight I kind of want to talk about my approach to elk calling. And I'm sure as some of you see the backdrop, the office, looks a little bit different. I actually updated the furniture in here. Got a new desk, new setup, microphone stand. So cool thing is the platform actually rises, so I can stand because I kind of like to move sometimes when I talk. So all right. So, like I said, tonight I'm going to talk about, my approach to calling elk. And then also, if we have time, I'm going to go into a couple of other things. So, Sandy, are you going to do any giveaways for Patreon this year? Yes, I do actually have some things in the works with some of the brand partners. So, yeah, stay tuned. We actually have some things coming. May even do some raffles like I did. What we may do with the raffles, get some new equipment, new bows, new sights, that kind of stuff. The bow, what we may do is go 100 slots, $20 per ticket. Do it different this time. You actually can choose your number. If that number is available, it's yours. If not, you'll have to choose another number, but just kind of a little bit different twist on it. So, all right, so let's jump into it. So my approach to calling elk is basically friend first, fight second. So reason I like this approach is you take the friend approach. You're not putting any aggressive sounds out. You don't have to worry about intimidating anybody. And it is specific sounds. I mean, usually it's starting with inviting cow sounds that are asking for some sort of a response, whether that is a response verbally or a response physically to come to. So one of the things that we've talked about is, starting out with like assembly mews or regathering mews. So those are friends first. And then also if I do get to the point where, I have a bull responding and I want to kind of see, are we going to stay on that friend conversation or are we going to ramp up in aggression? That's where, I'll introduce the bull sound with like some huffs, grunts, and whines or like raking. So huffs, grunts, and whines, I may do. It's nothing aggressive. And usually, as soon as you introduce that bull vocalization, it is going to tell you exactly right away what you're dealing with, what kind of bull you're intertwined with there, and you're going to know this immediately based on his response. Does he respond timid? Does he respond? Does he respond aggressively? That's really going to tip your hat right there. Now, it could be too that this is kind of one of those things, and it's almost, and I think really where this approach stemmed from was I took a lot of psychology classes in college because it fascinated me, the human mind and Pavlov's theory of conditioned stimulus and conditioned response. It was fascinating to me how the mind works, and that kind of, I think one day helped me kind of develop my approach to elk calling and elk hunting because I really started to pay attention to how they were responding to what I was doing. And then, the light bulb goes off. It's like, okay, if I'm doing X and that bull is really responding, why would I change for this? And you see this a lot out there. You'll see people that will do cow sounds and they'll get a bull bugling back and they immediately turn to aggressive style bugles to engage that bull, and they're not getting any responses. I mean, it goes from this bull responding almost every time you call to responding once every 5 times you bugle. And a lot of people can't understand that. They can't. They basically say, what's wrong? Or did he see us? Did he wind us? Or is he, maybe he's coming. And no, you took away his excitement. You took away what he was looking for. So that's why I always start with that friends first. Because if you start with that friends first, you can always escalate it. You can always step up the aggression level. But if you start aggressive, you can't backpedal. You can't back it off. You're forced to stay in that lane. And so that's, one of the biggest things that I see a lot of people is introducing the aggressive too soon. Whoops, didn't want to close that out. Sorry, guys. The other thing that, I've learned too in my other approach is, and you guys have heard me mention this, work an area, not elk. And this is especially true during the start of season when the elk aren't really vocal. My approach at that time of year is I'm actually going to move slower. I'm not going to cover his ground as fast because I'm really, really keying in on what's happening around me. What the elk are doing, what the sign is looking like. And that's the biggest thing early on. You're reading sign, you're reading areas, and that's where that patience and that approach of working areas instead of working elk comes into play. We call in a lot of elk early in the season, and a good majority of them don't even make a peep. Don't even make a sound. And unfortunately, a lot of people just blow through those areas and they miss a lot of opportunities, a lot of chances. So if you slow down and just work those areas and take that approach of I'm going to be more patient, and I know we talked about this a couple episodes back, that patience was one of the lessons. In fact, actually it was the last episode because we were on the Zoom call. And I talked about where patience is one of the top 3 things. And really early season is one of those times that you really want to have a lot of patience. Because non-vocal elk, they're not piping off. So, I mean, really, if you're not getting a lot of responses, why not stop and work that area? I mean, yeah, there could be a bull somewhere that's cracking off a bugle, but in my experience, and I know what happens. So, you go out opening weekend, you don't get a lot of responses. You come back to town after that first weekend and you're talking with people, and there's people that'll go, oh man, those dudes were screaming in my area. And so you immediately get it stuck in your head of, well, I must have been in the wrong place. So just because they're screaming over in one area does not mean they're screaming everywhere, especially early in the season. It just so happens that over in that area, there could have been an older cow that came into estrus early, and that's what caused that over there. And so then the next weekend when you go out, your patience level is a lot shorter. You're all about covering that ground. You're all about finding those screaming elk because, somebody they were screaming over in their area. Don't fall into that trap. Stay with your game plan. Trust your game plan and have the patience to execute it. So, What calls do you start with in the mornings when first starting out? Actually, I start out the same way. It doesn't matter if it's morning, if it's evening, if it's the first of the season, middle of the season, or last of the season. Whenever I am, so I'm going to cover this two ways. So one way, if I'm in transition, I have a spot, I have a destination I want to get to, and I'm traveling from point A to point B. I am going to locate as I move along, just to see if I can get something to pipe off, just to see if I can get something to answer me. Because obviously, if my destination is 2.5, 3 miles in, but if I get into a bull at mile 1, there's no need to walk the rest of the way in. So there's a bull right there, especially if I can engage him and get him on the ground. Saves a little bit of walking for another day when we do actually have to cover quite a bit of ground. But usually locating, it's always the same way. So I always start off with cow sounds. And the first thing I do is I start off soft. Usually just 1 or 2 soft cow calls. Now, if I get no response, then I'm going to use something like my grunt tube or the game changer. And now I'm going to add a little bit of inflection in there. I'm going to do that excited cow, that excited lost cow. Because now I'm wanting to project. I'm wanting to cover a little bit farther out just to see if something is a little bit farther out that they didn't hear me with that first cow sound. Now, if no response, just a nice, easy location bugle. Now, I'm waiting a couple of minutes in between each of these because I want to give that sound a chance to get out there and give his response a chance to get back. So, no response. Again, that's just a 2-note location bugle with a couple of chuckles. Again, I'm going to wait. If no response, then I'm going to go into that lip ball display bugle. The reason I go into that lip ball display before I move on to the next spot is every sound I've done up to that point is, hey, where are you? Is anybody out there? Now, as soon as I hit that lip ball, display, dominance bugle, there's a lot of different names for it. Now I'm sending a different message. Now I'm telling cows, come to me, I'm a dominant bull. But I'm telling bulls, stay away, I'm a dominant bull. So again, let's go back to that psychology mindset. All the sounds leading up to that is, hey, where are you? If there's a bull hanging out there within earshot, and all I'm saying is, hey, where are you? He has cows. He's not in a fighting mood. I'm far enough away from him. I'm not a threat. Why would he answer me? He has no reason to answer me. Now, as soon as you throw that lip ball out there, that's a different deal. Because now he doesn't know if you caught scent of his cows or know his cows are there, and you're actually calling his cows to you. You're telling his cows to come to you. And he could fire off with a response telling you to stay away. Or he's a little more dominant bull and he runs that area and you're coming in there now telling everybody stay away. I'm the big dude on the block. He's going to take offense to that, of you coming into his area and telling him to get out of it. So that's basically how I locate. And I will repeat that same pattern anywhere I want to locate from. Hold on a sec. Another comment. Okay. So Sandy, I'll finish this one and then I'll jump over to your question. Okay, now, what calls do you start with when I'm starting to do a setup? The breeding sequence is my go-to. Now, early in the season, the first couple of setups in the morning, I will do more of a inviting cow routine. And I've talked about this. There are videos on the inviting cow routine. The inviting cow routine is a mixture of cow sounds that it's all inviting. That's the hence for the name, inviting cow routine, because you're inviting action. You're inviting for a response back, or you're inviting for something to come to you. It consists of lost excited mews, assembly mews, demanding mews, regathering mews, normal mews. Get some long mews in there where you're kind of whining a little bit. And it's a mixture of those. Now, if I'm starting the breeding sequence, I always start with the cow sounds. It's a group of cows just kind of talking back and forth, milling. Nice, friendly, relaxed, everyday conversation. It's not it's not alerting. It's just conversation. So, okay. So those are calls that I'll start with in the morning. So, you guys. So, side note real quick. Remember I told you guys that Knox, my youngest, joined me last year in the Elkwoods for the first time. And the first trip up, I was trying to teach him how to use an open reed cow call. And he just didn't like it because it really tickled his lips. And so we made him the designated raker. And then after season, it dawned on me that I should have gone a different route with him, something that he could do very easy. So, last night we had to run to Cabela's to pick up a couple of items, and while I was there, I told Knox, I said, hey, we're going to grab something to get you ready for elk season. So, yes, guys. The hoochie mama and the baby hoochie mama. And that may have blew your ears off because it was right next to the mic. Sorry about that, guys. So... okay, Sandy had a question. You guys are popping in questions tonight. I like it. Do you do any calling in the field during off season? Not really, Sandy. About a week before the season, I may do some location bugles just because I'm extremely excited to hear that first bugle of the year. But other than that, no, I don't go out and call any other time of the year. The rest of the year, it's more observing, glassing, paying attention while I'm setting trail cameras or going in and swapping cards on trail cameras. But very, very, very little calling except for the week before, just because I got to hear that first bugle. And usually that week before, we're up setting camp. You know, we always go up the weekend before season starts, set up camp, and you know, we do a lot of glassing and we do a lot of checking from elevated positions. We don't go into our hunt areas. We have areas that we can go and lay eyes on those so that we don't disturb the elk, and we kind of get a good idea of, yep, they're still in the patterns they always are, who's moved in, who's moved out, who hasn't moved in yet, and we get a good game plan of what we're going to do for that first weekend. Very rarely do we really hunt the same exact spot opening morning. So usually varies. So, Charlie, when hunting as a group, like 4 and doing cold calling sequence, cow party, what's your most successful spacing? So groups of 4, I haven't done it a ton. I really like groups of 3. Groups of 3 to me, I think are absolutely perfect. It's the right number. But you know, space it out. You don't want to be 60, 70, 80 yards apart. You know, we might 25, 30 yards, maybe 35. So just depends on how thick the vegetation is. So, we hunt thicker timber, so we don't spread out as much. And also too, since there's only 4 of you or 3, you don't want to be so spread out that it's not realistic. So, they do bed down fairly close to each other. In fact, a good rule of thumb, Charlie, if you go into a bedding area, pay attention to the beds. See how far apart they are. So, and then what you might do is, say there's 10 beds in there, see how much area that 10 bed covers. Then what you can do with the 4 is you can stage the 4 on those 4 corners, and that will give you your spacing. So, all right. Okay, so back on the approach real quick. So, and my approach and my mindset doesn't really change throughout the season, other than as the season progresses, I know I can bring the bull vocalizations in sooner and I can get more aggressive faster with that. So, but the other approach too that I have is I am always telling a story when I'm calling. I want to paint a picture in that elk's mind of what's going on. They should be able to lay over there hearing what I'm doing and know exactly what's going on over there, because we're mimicking real elk situations, whether it's the breeding sequence or the inviting cow. Those are built based on real live situations. So I will stay in my routine. I will stay in that story that I'm doing. So if you get that approach in your head that you're a storyteller or a painter and you're painting a picture with a paintbrush, and no matter what's going on around you, you're going to focus and you're going to stay on that. There is a time to switch. And I've mentioned it a few times when you're doing that breeding sequence and you have a bull that's 250 yards, 300 yards out there and he's just responding to you. He's not a threat at that distance. And if you ever watch elk, he doesn't pay a ton of attention to that elk that's 300 yards out there. Sure, he will turn occasionally and throw that lip ball out there just telling him, dude, stay over there. Don't come over here. But as soon as that bull starts coming and he breaks that 150-yard mark, it's a whole different ball game. Now that bull is going to turn into a defensive bull and he's going to defend his hot cow. That's exactly what you need to do when you're telling your story. So if you're doing the breeding sequence, and again, this is the mistake that a lot of people make. They're in the breeding sequence, they're telling the story, they get that bull out there at 300 yards, they completely drop telling their story, and they just focus on him. And in reality, when a bull has a hot cow, he's got tunnel vision. That's all he sees, that's all he thinks, that's all he smells. That's his attention, that's his focus. Until another elk breaks his comfort zone, then he's going to turn into that defensive mode. Then he's really going to pay attention to that other bull. Okay. What's the first set of calls? How far in distance and time before you do another location set? That really varies. It really varies on, what the terrain is like, how thick the timber is. Good example. Let's say you're kind of hiking up a trail that's kind of in the bottom of a draw. And you're calling and you're blasting up. If you, say this is a point and you bugled from here and you walk up the trail and that trail goes around this point, the fact that I called back here, as soon as I loop around that point, I'm going to call again. Because when I was on this side, there was a good chance that my sound did not really cross over into this other side. Or if there's elk that are down lower, they would have never heard me. So I'm going to do that trail around. Vice versa. If this is the top of a ridge and I'm calling on this side, if there's anything back down over here, they're not going to hear me. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to cross over a little bit. I very rarely stay on the top because you can get silhouetted really easy up there. So I'm going to drop off that point, off the top of that ridge, down a little bit so that I've got something back behind my silhouette, and then I'm going to call down in there. If you're calling in an area where the trees are really, really thick, you're going to stop more frequently. Could be 200 yards, 300 yards. Or if I'm calling in really thick timber, and as soon as I get to the edge and it starts to open up, I'm going to call before I step out into that area that really opens up. Or just like if I'm coming through and I know there's a meadow coming up, I'm going to stay in the timber. Because if anything answers, I want to have that timber that gives me the ability to move. I don't want to be out in that meadow and then all of a sudden something answers that's just on the other side of the meadow in the trees. I'm busted. There's nothing I can do at that point. So a lot of different variables on that one about, distance. Time is kind of irrelevant. Really, honestly, it's a feeling. If you're moving along and you get the feeling to do another set of location sounds, do another set of location sounds. There is no set rule that says you have to walk 127 steps and it has to be 9.5 minutes until you can call again. So, because again, there's a lot of variables. It could be, heck, could be in the morning and they're stopping for water, and they were at that creek getting water, and you called, but they couldn't hear you. They got done drinking, crossed the creek, and it's only been a couple of minutes, and you call again, and man, they hear you and they respond. So remember what they're doing at each time of day. Morning, they're heading to their bedding area. Generally, they're going to stop and get water before they go and bed down. A lot of times, too, when they've been feeding all night, they want to get that water and then start their journey. Evening time, they've been bedding down for a while. Probably going to get a little bit more water before they head, unless they have a water source right over there close by where they feed. Midday, they're going to get up, mill around, they're going to feed, and they're going to water both. Okay. So that's pretty much it that I wanted to cover for kind of, my approach. So, kind of recap. Friends first, then fight. And you have to build it up from friend to fight. You can't just go from 0 to 60 in 2.2. You have to build that aggression level up. Work areas, not elk, especially during the beginning of the season. Now, if you do have vocal elk around, focus on those vocal elk, focus on getting to them, and get set up and start working those elk. But if you don't have vocal elk, that's when you really want to slow down and work those areas. So, okay. One more thing real quick, and then, so if you guys have any more questions, go ahead and throw some last round of questions. So I'm sure a lot of you saw on social media that the big monarch bull in Estes Park, Colorado, was killed by a mountain lion. And that got me to thinking, there's a lot of photographers that are really sharing a lot of pictures of this dude from the last several years. And, it got me thinking about the areas that I've hunted for years. And, there really is an advantage of that because you get to know the elk in that area, especially if you have elk that do interesting things. We had chuckles, we had one note, we had dragon, we had angry bull, and we still have angry bull. We've taken one of his offspring, two of his offspring out of that herd, but we haven't caught up with Angry Bull. He's a good mature bull, but it's kind of cool because, like I said, watching these guys pay tribute to this bull that they photographed for so many years, and you know, they were sharing pictures of him, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And it's so neat to see his progression. And that's one of the things that you hunt an area year after year and you get to know these elk. And it's almost like you connect with an old friend. You go in there and you get to see who survived the winter, who survived archery season, who survived, rifle season, who's back for another year, who's now the dominant bull in the creek drainage or the basin. And it's just, it's a lot of fun getting to know them. And I think it's one of those things that it kind of takes your pursuit of them to kind of another level, because you do get to know them. And then when you do get the opportunity to, harvest one of those guys, it just means so much more. And, it's really, really cool to experience that. And, like in our group, we each have our favorite area. And you can definitely tell because the shooter is the one that chooses where we're going for that day. And definitely you always know that when it's rolling around to somebody in the group, you pretty much know where you're going. But it's kind of cool too to, go in there and see who's there and get to know them. So I want to challenge you guys that if you hunt the same area year after year, not just get to know the terrain, not just get to know the area that you hunt, but get to know the elk that live in that area also. And see what it does to your mental state when you're out there. If you run trail cameras, you'll see them on the trail cameras year after year and watch them grow. And you can go back. And that's one of the things when these guys were sharing, a lot of pictures of Bruno, incredible thirds. I mean, he had a lot of names. I went back through a lot of my old trail camera photos and, reminisced and memories about some of those bulls that are on the camera. I'm very lucky that, some of those guys are hanging on my walls, but some of them aren't, and it makes me wonder, what happened to him? Did anybody get him? Did he die of old age? How old was he? What did he survive? What did he go through? I mean, this bull, he had an incredible story. I mean, this guy's herds were enormous. I mean, talking to some of the photographers, I mean, he had 80 to 90 cows. I mean, just a huge herd. They did score him. He had shed one side before he passed, but they found the other shed. They did score him. He scored 426 and 6/8, and he was actually in regression. His biggest year was 2019. He's actually regressed a couple, or the past couple of years. But so I went back through, and he had a really rough rut. He got a lot of injuries this year. And that's one thing that's kind of shocking because he survived those injuries. He survived the Colorado winter. And it was a combination of a snowstorm and a mountain lion. And it could have been that his injuries played into that. In battling with all the injuries and then through the winter, pretty weak in state. They did share some pictures of his teeth. Most of his teeth were completely worn down. I mean, this was an old dude. But I had a bull that had a scar on the left shoulder. Saw him for 3 years on camera, and once down in the fields during the wintertime, have not been able to see him again for 2 years. Yeah, if he was consistent on your trail cameras and in your ear area, and you're not seeing him for 2 years, there's a good chance that a hunter harvested him, or a predator, or he could have just passed away from old age. But those are the things that are kind of cool to see, and watch that year after year with those guys. I mean, I just have so much respect for them. So, all right, checking Patreon page. Something else popped in. So let the comment pop up here. So hopefully the stream has been okay tonight too, because I did just switch to a new internet service. The modem's in a different place, and so I knew tonight was going to kind of be the test to see how the stream went and if I needed to get an extender. So found an area that has a few wallows. Bedding is on a bench near the upper wallow. Should I target one over the other? Sandy, it really depends how much space is in between those. If you know they're bedding on the bench, again, it's the principle. I don't like going in to bedding areas unless it's right down towards the tail end of the season and I have no other option. If I can hunt the edges of the bedding area and draw them to me, that's a great way to go. So what I would do is, if you could get to that wallow area, especially if their travel corridor takes them past that wallow up to the bedding area, if you can get off to the side of that your thermals are good, get to that wallow before them and work them. Or if you can't get there before them, try to work them in transition, let them go to bed, and then you hang out by the wallow. But again, you got to be careful because of that wallow's below them with thermals up. You have to be on the sides. You want to be close enough that it doesn't matter if they're in the bedding area or the wallow, that they can hear you, and also in a position that they have easy access over to you, but you're controlling your thermals. You're controlling where your thermals are going, and your thermals are not going to them. Because the last thing you want to do is get too close or get into an area where you blow them out. Because if you blow them out, there's a good chance they're not going to come back for several days. And if you only have, let's say, 10 days to hunt, you do this on day 1, it may not be until day 5, maybe day 6, that they come back into that area, and you've lost several days of hunting. So get close, but don't go in. Unless it is towards the tail end of your hunt, and you don't have any other chance of going back in there, then going after them. Hail Mary, press it hard. So, Jim, you're good here with everything. Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to end up with the sound of the day, because if I don't do it, y'all know I'm going to hear about it. So, started with Larry. Now Sandy's starting to get on the act, too, of holding me accountable. Okay. Today is not really a sound. It's more of a technique. So, some of you that have done lessons with me, you've heard me talk about this. So we are emulating an animal, or we're trying to portray an animal whose lungs are twice the size of ours, their esophagus is twice the size of ours, they have good holy depth and hollowness to their tones. This is pretty applicable with cow sounds. So we have to cheat. And there's one of three, there's really 3 ways that we can cheat. First one is we can take our bottom jaw, and drop it. Hear how it lets the nasaliness out at the end, lets that sound expand. Second way is a joker face. We're going to take the corners of our mouth and we're just going to kind of pull them back. Listen to this. Hoochie Mama really doesn't have bad sound. Okay, third way. Open your mouth all the way. Each one's a little bit different, and if you hear, each one kind of manipulates the sound just a little bit different. Now, the challenge with this, and the best way for you to practice this, is in front of a mirror. Because normally when you're calling, when you're practicing, you're only using your auditory system. That sounds good. Oh my God, that sounded horrible. Don't do that sound again. But when you get in front of a mirror, now you're getting your visual senses in it, and the two are working together. And your brain's recognizing what you're doing with your mouth and how it sounds to get the tone that you want. So practicing in front of a mirror is a great way to know what you do with your mouth, how that's going to manipulate each of the sounds to get the tones that you want. Now, I will do different things with my mouth for different sounds. The regathering mew is one of the sounds that I do only with my mouth all the way open. It just, to me, it has the tones that I want. It has the tones that's realistic. It matches the realism. So play with those. Play with those 3 different facial features or expressions and see how they manipulate your sounds. Pay attention. And then when you're out there calling, you know how to hold your mouth to do the sound that you want. And you'll get that muscle memory by practicing. Once you have it in the mirror, you know exactly here, it's in muscle memory. Now we know what we need to do with this to get that tone that we want. So, okay, here's the call of the day. Or I guess I should say calling tip of the day. How about that? So, all right, guys, I don't see any more questions, don't see any more comments, so we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Again, welcome to the new studio. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the questions, all the comments. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys. As always, keep calling, keep practicing. More importantly, though, have fun. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks on the next Wapiti Live Q&A.